Imagine the map of the Indo-Pacific theater. Now, imagine that you are a highly decorated flag officer in the People's Liberation Army Navy, Plan, sitting in a heavily fortified command bunker in Beijing. You have been tasked with the ultimate unthinkable strategic objective, to force the capitulation of the Australian continent. You must either execute a total maritime blockade to starve their economy, or you must land a massive, mechanized amphibious invasion force on their northern shores to seize their strategic resources and neutralize the Western Alliance's primary southern sanctuary. You look at your assets. You have the largest surface fleet on the face of the Earth. You have massive Type 075 landing helicopter docks, squadrons of Type 055 guided missile cruisers, and an armada of civilian roll-on/roll-off (RORO) ferries ready to transport hundreds of thousands of combat troops, main battle tanks and artillery pieces. You possess overwhelming numerical superiority. You possess the industrial might of a superpower. But as you trace the route from the naval bases in Hainan and Guangdong down to the coast of the Australian Northern Territory, the confidence evaporates. The blood runs cold. Because you are not fighting the Australian Defence Force. You are fighting the map. You are staring down the barrel of a 3,000-kilometer expanse of hostile deep-water ocean. You are looking at a maze of narrow, treacherous, easily monitored archipelagic choke points. You are looking at a logistical tether that is so long, so stretched, and so incredibly vulnerable that keeping your fleet fueled and armed will require a miracle of maritime engineering. To reach the beaches of Darwin or the iron ore ports of the Pilbara, your massive, slow-moving invasion fleet must run a gauntlet that has been meticulously, ruthlessly designed to slaughter ships. It must cross a moat filled with nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines, autonomous robotic mines, hypersonic cruise missiles, and fifth-generation stealth fighters. You realize the terrifying, unsentimental truth of military geography. You cannot conquer a continent when the ocean itself has been weaponized against you. The Western Alliance has stopped worrying about China's A2/AD missile bubbles, because Australia has just built the largest, deadliest kill zone on the planet. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are executing a deep, forensic analysis of the ultimate geographic fortress, and how the free world is turning the tyranny of distance into a weapon of mass destruction. Here is the thesis for this episode. For 2 centuries, Australia viewed its immense geographic isolation as its greatest vulnerability. It was the tyranny of distance, the terrifying reality of being located at the bottom of the world, far away from primary allies and industrial supply chains. But in the era of long-range precision strike warfare, that isolation is no longer a curse. It is an impenetrable shield. If you are beginning to understand why the true balance of geopolitical power is not decided by the number of ships in a parade, but by the brutal, unsentimental mathematics of maritime logistics, supply chain vulnerability, and archipelagic geography, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We strip away the political rhetoric and the media panic to bring you the cold, kinetic realities of how the free world actually builds, fights, and teeters. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of uncompromising strategic analysis. In 2024, the Australian government released the National Defence Strategy. It marked the definitive, ruthless end of the balanced force. The Australian military is no longer trying to be a miniature version of the United States, capable of fighting counterinsurgencies in the desert while simultaneously patrolling the open ocean. The new doctrine is the strategy of denial. It is a laser-focused hyperlethal posture designed to do one thing and one thing only: ensure that no adversary can project power across the northern approaches. We are going to break down the brutal math of invasion, the absolute logistical nightmare of trying to sustain a fleet across 3,000 kilometers of contested water. We are going to analyze the strategy of denial in action, how the Australian Army has abandoned its traditional mindset to become a land-based ship-killing vanguard. We will explore the apex predators of the deep, the role of AUKUS nuclear submarines and autonomous ghost sharks in locking down the Indonesian Straits. And finally, we will look at the continental fortress, why the sheer, staggering size of the Australian landmass makes it mathematically impossible to conquer. Let us begin by looking at the map, and why a Chinese invasion fleet is nothing more than a procession of sitting ducks. The 3,000-kilometer death ride. To understand the absolute, fundamental impossibility of conquering the Australian continent, we must first strip away the Hollywood illusions of warfare and look at the brutal, uncompromising mathematics of maritime logistics. In the minds of the general public, an amphibious invasion looks like D-Day in Normandy. It looks like thousands of landing craft charging across a narrow strip of water under the cover of darkness. But the English Channel is only 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. The distance from the primary Chinese naval bases in the South China Sea, such as the massive complex at Yulin on Hainan Island, to the northern coast of Australia is roughly 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers, depending on the route. This is not a quick sprint across a channel. This is the equivalent of attempting to execute a D-Day-style amphibious landing by launching the invasion fleet from the coast of New York and landing on the coast of Ireland, all while under constant, relentless high-technology bombardment from the most advanced weapon systems on the planet. An invasion fleet, by its very nature, is incredibly slow. You cannot transport heavy mechanized armor, main battle tanks, self-propelled howitzers, armored personnel carriers, and tens of thousands of infantry troops on fast-moving stealth ships. You must transport them on massive, lumbering amphibious transport docks, LPDs, landing helicopter docks, LHDs, and a vast armada of requisitioned civilian roll-on/roll-off, RORO, vehicle ferries. These vessels are behemoths. They have massive radar cross-sections. They produce enormous thermal signatures. And critically, they move at an average cruising speed of perhaps 15 to 20 knots. To cross the 3,000-kilometer expanse of the Pacific and Indian Oceans at 15 knots takes approximately 4 to 6 days of continuous sailing. For 4 to 6 days, the Chinese invasion fleet is completely exposed in the open ocean. There is nowhere to hide. They are being tracked every single second of that journey by the Jindalee Operational Radar Network, JORN. Australia's massive over-the-horizon radar system that bounces high-frequency radio waves off the ionosphere, capable of detecting the wake and massive metal hulls of a fleet from thousands of kilometers away. They are being tracked by United States space-based infrared satellites. They are being tracked by high-altitude, long-endurance surveillance drones like the NQ-4C Triton. For 144 hours, this massive, slow-moving armada is nothing more than a procession of highly visible, high-value targets, crawling across a 3,000-kilometer kill zone. It is a death ride. The vulnerability of the tether. But the initial transit of the invasion fleet is only a fraction of the logistical nightmare. In military strategy, there is a fundamental axiom. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. If by some absolute miracle of electronic warfare and localized air superiority, a Chinese amphibious force manages to land a mechanized army on the beaches of Darwin or the rugged coastline of the Pilbara, their problems have not ended, they have only just begun. An army of 100,000 men, equipped with heavy armor, consumes a staggering, almost incomprehensible volume of supplies every single day. They require millions of liters of diesel fuel to keep their tanks and generators running. They require thousands of tons of fresh water and rations. They require a continuous, unbroken river of 155mm artillery shells, precision-guided munitions, medical supplies and replacement parts. Once the invasion force is ashore in Australia, that massive logistical requirement must be met by a continuous conveyor belt of supply ships sailing back and forth between the Chinese mainland and the Australian coast. This is the logistical tether. And it is the most vulnerable, fragile, and easily severed artery in modern warfare. To sustain a beachhead in the southern hemisphere, the People's Liberation Army Navy plan would have to deploy hundreds of unarmed, slow-moving fleet oilers, civilian cargo ships, and ammunition freighters. These ships have no armor. They have no vertical launch cells. They possess no point defense rotary cannons. The Western Alliance does not need to engage in a heroic, symmetric battle against the heavily armed Chinese Type 055 cruisers. They simply need to sink the fuel tankers and the ammunition ships. If the Royal Australian Air Force, RAF, and the Allied submarine fleet target the logistical tether, the Chinese army stranded on the Australian coast will run out of diesel in a matter of days. Their tanks will become static pillboxes. Their generators will die, plunging their command centers into darkness. Their artillery batteries will fall silent. The strategy of denial relies on this exact mathematical reality. By stretching the enemy's supply lines across a 3,000-kilometer ocean moat, Australia ensures that the adversary's center of gravity is not their frontline combat troops, but their incredibly fragile, easily targeted logistical fleet. You do not have to defeat the invasion. You simply have to starve it to death on the beaches. The Northern Vanguard. For decades, the Australian Defence Force ADF operated under a philosophy of balanced operations. The Army, Navy, and Air Force were designed to be a miniature reflection of the United States military, capable of deploying task forces to the Middle East to fight counterinsurgencies, while simultaneously maintaining a boutique, high-end capability for regional contingencies. The Army's heavy armor and primary combat brigades were largely stationed in the comfortable, temperate southern cities of Adelaide and Brisbane. The 2024 National Defense Strategy violently eradicated this outdated paradigm. It recognized that a balanced force is a master of none, and in a high-intensity conflict against an industrialized superpower, a master of none is quickly destroyed. The ADF has pivoted to a posture of absolute, uncompromising focus. They are building a focused, heavily armed littoral strike force explicitly designed to project lethal power into the northern approaches. The most visible manifestation of this strategic shift is the massive relocation of the Australian Army. The Army is moving its center of gravity to the north. The 1st Brigade in Darwin is being radically transformed into a light, highly mobile, easily deployable littoral combat force. The 3rd Brigade in Townsville, Queensland, is becoming the heavy, armored fist of the nation, consolidating the M1A2 Abrams tanks, the incoming Redback infantry fighting vehicles, and the heavy artillery. The aviation brigades, flying the new AH-64E Apache attack helicopters and UH-60M Black Hawks, are being consolidated in the north to provide immediate, overwhelming close air support and rapid troop mobility. This is the creation of the Northern Vanguard. Australia is no longer hiding its combat power in the southern sanctuaries. It is moving its heavy hitters directly to the edge of the moat, positioning them to immediately respond to any incursion or to rapidly project power forward into the archipelagos. The land-based ship killers. But the most terrifying evolution of the Australian Army is not its tanks or its infantry. It is its sudden, aggressive transformation into an anti-ship artillery juggernaut. The days of the Army fighting exclusively on the dirt are over. The strategy of denial dictates that every branch of the military must be capable of sinking enemy ships. The centerpiece of this new doctrine is the acquisition and radical repurposing of the M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, HIMARS. The HIMARS gained legendary status in the mud of Eastern Europe, acting as a highly precise counter-battery and deep strike weapon against static logistics hubs. The Australian Army is taking this platform and turning it into a coastal defense nightmare. By integrating the Precision Strike Missile, PRSM, and actively pursuing the integration of land-based maritime strike variants, the Australian Army is weaponizing the islands and coastlines of the Indo-Pacific. Imagine the tactical scenario. An Australian HIMARS battery, operated by a small, highly trained crew, is loaded onto the back of a C-130J Hercules or a C-17 Globemaster transport plane. The aircraft takes off from a hardened base in the Northern Territory and lands on a remote, austere dirt airstrip on a tiny island in the Indonesian archipelago, or on a remote peninsula in the vast Australian northwest. The HIMARS truck rolls off the ramp. It connects via secure, encrypted data links, the Air 6500 Joint Air Battle Management System, to an RAF F-35A Lightning II stealth fighter flying hundreds of miles away in contested airspace. The F-35, acting as an invisible forward observer, detects a Chinese amphibious assault group attempting to transit through a narrow strait. The F-35 pilot does not fire a weapon. The jet simply beams the exact targeting coordinates to the HIMARS battery waiting on the dirt runway. The HIMARS elevates its launch pod and fires a salvo of hypersonic or highly maneuverable anti-ship ballistic missiles. The missiles fly over the horizon and obliterate the Chinese ships. Within 2 minutes of firing, the HIMARS truck drives back into the cargo hold of the C-130, and the aircraft takes off, disappearing into the sky before the enemy can even calculate a counter-battery radar track. This is the shoot-and-scoot doctrine applied to naval warfare. By combining the highly mobile, deeply hidden land-based missile batteries with the omniscient sensor network of 5th-generation fighters and E-7A Wedgetail surveillance aircraft, Australia ensures that the entire northern coastline is a lethal, impenetrable threat ring. The adversary is not just fighting a navy, they are fighting a continent that shoots back. The nuclear gatekeepers. A moat is only effective if it prevents the enemy from crossing. And in the vast, deep-water trenches of the Indo-Pacific, the ultimate gatekeepers are not found on the surface. They are found in the lightless, crushing depths of the ocean. The strategy of denial is heavily predicated on establishing an absolute, uncompromising advantage in the undersea domain. The surface of the ocean is becoming increasingly lethal, saturated with hypersonic missiles, persistent satellite surveillance, and drone swarms. But the water column below the surface remains opaque, complex, and incredibly difficult to monitor. This is why the acquisition of nuclear-powered attack submarines, SSNs, under the AUKUS agreement is the singular, most critical strategic investment in Australian history. Conventional diesel-electric submarines like the highly capable but limited Collins class are fantastic for defending a localized area. But they are tethered to the surface by their need to snort, to run their diesel engines to recharge their batteries, exposing them to radar and acoustic detection. More importantly, they lack the sustained speed to transit across the massive distances of the 3,000-kilometer moat quickly. An SSN changes the geopolitical geometry of the region. Powered by a pressurized water reactor, an American Virginia-class or a British-designed SSN AUKUS possesses infinite range and the ability to sprint at speeds exceeding 30 knots while completely submerged, continuously, 4 months at a time. These nuclear leviathans are the apex predators of the deep. They do not wait off the coast of Darwin for the enemy fleet to arrive. They push the defensive perimeter thousands of kilometers forward. They will lurk in the incredibly narrow deep-water choke points of the Indonesian archipelago, the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait, the Ambai Strait, and the Malacca Strait. If the Chinese Navy attempts to break out of the South China Sea to threaten Australia or cut the global energy supply lines in the Indian Ocean, they must funnel their massive, noisy surface ships through these precise, predictable corridors. The Australian and Allied nuclear submarines will be waiting in the dark. Armed with heavyweight Spearfish or Mk-48 ADCAP torpedoes, and capable of launching Tomahawk cruise missiles, a single SSN can paralyze an entire enemy task group. The mere threat, the psychological terror of knowing that an invisible, unkillable nuclear submarine is waiting in the strait, is enough to force an adversary fleet to halt its advance. They are the ultimate instrument of sea denial, the ghost shark swarm. But the West has realized that relying solely on exquisite, multi-billion-dollar nuclear submarines is a dangerous vulnerability. Nuclear submarines take years to build and require massive, highly trained crews. In a war of attrition, you cannot risk your most valuable assets on every mission. You must augment the apex predators with a swarm of expendable, highly intelligent hunters. Enter the Ghost Shark Extra-Large Autonomous Undersea Vehicle, XLAUV. Designed and manufactured in Australia by Endural Industries, the Ghost Shark is the technological manifestation of the strategy of denial. It represents a fundamental shift away from the legacy mindset of platform-centric warfare toward the brutal efficiency of mass and autonomy. The Ghost Shark is not a remote-controlled toy, it is a massive, highly autonomous robotic submarine. Costing a fraction of a manned submarine, it can be manufactured rapidly at scale, using sovereign Australian supply chains. These robotic hunters do not require life support systems, food, or sleep. They can be deployed from a port in Sydney or airdropped into a forward operating base. They can sink to the seabed in a critical maritime choke point, power down their non-essential systems, and sit dormant for weeks or months at a time. They act as intelligent, mobile minefields. Utilizing advanced passive sonar arrays, they listen to the ambient noise of the ocean. When they detect the specific acoustic signature of a Chinese Type 052D destroyer or a Type 093 nuclear attack submarine, the Ghost Shark wakes up. It can autonomously execute a kill chain, launching a lightweight torpedo or releasing a smart naval mine. Alternatively, it can rise to periscope depth, burst transmit the precise coordinates of the enemy fleet to the overhead Air 6500 network, and instantly cue an overwhelming strike from land-based HIMARS batteries or RAF fighter jets. By flooding the northern approaches with swarms of ghost sharks, Australia forces the adversary into an impossible asymmetric cost exchange ratio. The Chinese Navy must spend billions of dollars, dedicate massive fleets of anti-submarine warfare, ASW, helicopters and destroyers, and waste incredibly valuable time attempting to hunt down and destroy $20 million robots. While the Chinese fleet is distracted, moving at a crawl to avoid the robotic ambush, the manned, nuclear-powered apex predators move in for the final devastating kill. The infrastructure of survival. A moat is only a delaying tactic if the castle behind it is made of glass. To ensure that the strategy of denial holds firm against an industrialized superpower, the Australian continent itself is being transformed into a hardened, resilient, and highly distributed fortress. For decades, the air bases and logistical hubs in northern Australia were treated as peacetime facilities. They had long runways, but they lacked the hardened infrastructure required to survive a modern high-intensity missile barrage. The new strategic reality has triggered a massive, multi-billion-dollar wave of militarization across the top end of the continent. The bare bases concept, a uniquely Australian strategic innovation, is being radically upgraded. Bases like RAF Base Shergar in far north Queensland, RAF Base Curtin in Western Australia, and RAF Base Learmonth are not permanently manned by massive squadrons of fighter jets. They are skeletal facilities, maintained in a state of readiness, designed to be rapidly activated in a crisis. When the threat indicators flash red, the RAF does not concentrate all of its F-35s and F/A-18 Super Hornets at a single highly vulnerable megabase like Darwin or Tyndall. They disperse the fleet across this vast network of northern bases. This is the doctrine of Agile Combat Employment, ACE. By spreading the highly valuable low-density strike assets across a landmass the size of Europe, Australia creates an insurmountable targeting nightmare for the PLA rocket force. If China wants to execute a preemptive strike to wipe out the Royal Australian Air Force on the ground, they cannot simply launch a saturation attack against one or two coordinates. They must simultaneously target half a dozen highly dispersed, heavily defended airfields located thousands of kilometers apart. Furthermore, these bases are currently receiving massive injections of capital to build hardened aircraft shelters, massive subterranean aviation fuel storage bunkers, and decentralized ammunition depots. The continent is being engineered to act as a sponge. It is designed to absorb the initial, inevitable blows of a high-tech conflict, survive the bombardment, and immediately regenerate combat power to strike back across the moat. The unconquerable geometry. Ultimately, the strategy of denial relies on the most brutal, unchanging law of human conflict. Geography is destiny. When you synthesize the massive distances of the 3,000-kilometer maritime approach, the treacherous, easily monitored choke points of the Indonesian archipelago, the lethal combination of nuclear submarines and autonomous ghost sharks lurking in the deep, and the distributed, heavily armed strike network of the Australian continent, you arrive at a singular, mathematically undeniable conclusion. The Australian continent is unconquerable. The People's Republic of China, despite its massive industrial base and staggering naval expansion, simply does not possess the logistical capacity, the maritime lift, or the force projection architecture required to push a massive invasion or blockade fleet across the Pacific, sustain it under relentless, multi-domain bombardment, and subjugate a landmass of this magnitude. The tyranny of distance has been entirely reversed. It is no longer Australia's primary weakness. It has been weaponized into the ultimate A2/AD bubble. Australia is no longer relying on the United States to act as a shield. The Australian Defence Force has recognized that in a global, systemic conflict, the U.S. Pacific Fleet will be heavily engaged in the first island chain, fighting for the survival of Taiwan and Japan. Australia has embraced its role as the untouchable southern anchor of the free world. By building a moat filled with hypersonic missiles, autonomous submarines, and fifth-generation stealth fighters, Australia ensures that the southern flank of the Western Alliance is absolutely secure. For years, the strategic narrative was dominated by the fear of China's anti-access/area denial networks. We focused endlessly on the artificial islands in the South China Sea and the terrifying range of the DF-26 ballistic missiles. We allowed the adversary to dictate the terms of the standoff. The 2024 National Defence Strategy, and the massive, aggressive realignment of the Australian military posture, marks the violent end of that reactive mindset. Australia has stopped worrying about the Chinese A2/AD bubble, and has decided to build a much larger, vastly more lethal one of its own. The 3,000-kilometer expanse of the northern approaches has been transformed from an empty ocean into the ultimate killing ground. The logistical realities of moving an army across that expanse are mathematically insurmountable for any adversary. The slow-moving supply ships, the massive amphibious transports, and the fuel tankers are nothing more than sitting ducks, waiting to be hunted by the apex predators of the deep and the land-based strike batteries of the Australian Army. The free world has realized that you do not need to match an authoritarian superpower ship for ship, or tank for tank. You simply have to weaponize the geography. You have to make the cost of crossing the moat so unimaginably high, so utterly catastrophic to the survival of the enemy's fleet, that the invasion is defeated in the minds of the strategic planners long before the first ship ever leaves port. Australia has built the ultimate continental fortress, and the moat is locked, loaded, and ready to fire. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you believe that the strategy of denial and the reliance on long-range strike weapons is enough to deter a Chinese fleet, or does Australia still need a massive, traditional surface navy to secure its trade routes? Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay lethal, and we'll see you in the next one.